Hi, I'm Madeline from Sheen Slings, and this is my video review of the Infantino Go Forward Carrier. Infantino Go Forward Carrier. So I'm going to show you this carrier in action, talk you through what it feels like, talk about it from bottom upwards, and then I'm going to discuss about pros and cons of this carrier, what age babies it works for, what positions you can do, and how it compares to other carriers, and quite importantly for this carrier, price. It's quite an interesting topic. So, and something we all care about. So this is it. It's fairly bulky, doesn't fall down too small. I'm going to open it up, and here you can see here is the waistband. So the waistband of this carrier is quite interesting. This is a flap. So if we move this out of the way for now, you can see the waistband itself is quite thinly padded and quite malleable, but it's fairly wide, so it does actually offer quite a bit of support, but it's not very, it's not thick, it's not bulky, it's quite soft against your body, and it pops on like so. But before I pop it on, I'm going to show you a couple of things. First of all, if you see inside here, we've got colour codes. This is a sizing mechanism for the main part of the carrier. So if I open this up, I can slide it in and make the seat narrower for a smaller child. The yellow is for infants, and the yellow is for infants, and the yellow and pink are for older babies, a wider seat. And in theory, the manual suggests one or the other, but as your baby grows, there's nothing to stop you sort of locking it in a more middle place. The blue is the forward facing, and I'm going to talk about that in a bit. And this flap again comes up and is to do with the forward facing. So when you're wearing it inwards or with an older child, it just sort of flaps down and it clips in out of the way. Slightly ugly, but you don't really notice it once it's on. So if I flick that up and put it on, so just loosen that off. Whoops. Loosen that off, put it on and fasten it to my waist. And like any carrier, I want to get it fairly tight, which I can do by just putting it across. So then the next step is the shoulder. Next part of putting this on is the shoulder straps. So this carrier is constructed so that it separates off the adult and the baby. So you fit the carrier first of all to the adult. And there is a back strap. You can do this behind your back, or if you're inflexible like me, I'm going to do it up first and throw it over my head. And I'm going to open this off to get my baby in. So you fit this to yourself first. With anything, if you're fitting it to yourself, this puts a layer, this can make it harder to breastfeed in. Although there is sort of space around the boob, so if you're clever about how you're wearing your clothes, in theory that should still be possible. So I'm going to fit that to myself. You'll see that the buckles aren't done up, but they're on elastic so they don't get lost, which is quite convenient. And then we've got a separate flap for the baby. Oh, before I get to that, I'm going to tell you about shoulder straps. So again, the shoulder straps are quite lightly padded, and so they're quite malleable. They will curve around you quite nicely. They're also curving in shape, so you can see they can curve around. This is one that you wear in H-bar. You can't cross the straps on this carrier, but because they're quite curving and you can adjust this to fit you, it's still fairly comfortable. As someone who prefers a cross, I still find this one fairly comfortable, but you don't have that choice. If you have a strong preference and you prefer a cross, this isn't one that does that. So I'm going to grab my baby. Oh, but before I do that, I'm going to be starting with quite a small baby, so I'm going to change my carrier over to those yellow smaller seats, and I'm going to grab my baby, and she sits in the panel. And then to do stuff, I'm going to find my straps, plug it in, and then again secure the top part of the carrier so it can come up, or in her case, because she's a little bit shorter, I'm going to fold that down before securing it to get it out of her way. And I do have the ability to sort of change the tightness of here, and to keep this secured I've got poppers, which I'm just going to pop in. The other things I've got on this carrier, I've actually removed it because I tend to not like fluffy bits, but I've got a detachable hood. And the nice thing about this hood is it's muslin, so it's very absorbent. You can sort of doubles up as a hood, and you know, soft and breathable. Doubles up as a hood, but also as a muslin cloth, really. And the other thing you've got for a slightly older baby than my doll is a teething toy. So it's just on a loop of Velcro, so you can attach it anywhere. And it's really quite a nice silicone teether, so they can really play with it, chew on it. Babies often chew on the straps of carriers. I suspect they probably still will chew on the straps of this carrier, but it's a nice little extra thing that comes in the box. So you can sort of see my baby's got a nice wide seat. They've got a nice curved spine. Again, I was talking about how we've sort of fitted the adult and the baby separately. This is something I found that's quite Marmite. Some people love that and some people hate it. So particularly parents who are very nervous about doing up a carrier around their baby can find that that gives them more confidence, or find that easier to do because it's just clicking around baby. You don't have to worry about fitting both of you at the same time. Whereas other people don't like the extra bulk and that sort of feeling of material being running between you and your baby, and it doesn't sort of feel as close. Just tighten that up. You know, so that's really a personal preference thing, and just depends on what you prefer and what you find easier to do. So now I've got it on. This is in the infant position. As I said, the seat widens, so it will go for a bigger child. I think realistically, having tried this a little bit over the last few months, I think realistically this is one that does work from relatively small, so probably 6 weeks or so upwards. It does grow, so it is weight tested to 18 kilos, but I think this is extremely optimistic. I think it grows, but it doesn't grow that big. I think more realistically, this is a carrier you're looking at working really well for the first year. You might get a little bit further than a year, but I wouldn't like to sort of promise you that. In terms of how it feels, the shaping is quite good, although it does feel quite clunky with lots of bits, and part of the bits to give the forward facing, which I'll show you in the middle in a minute. The material, compared to a lot of the other carriers in the market, it does feel quite synthetic-y. You can sort of a little bit feel the savings of this. So that's the other thing I should tell you about, is the price of this, and this is what really intrigues me about this carrier. The price of this is £55. And when you compare it to other carriers on the market that offer forward facing, like the Beko Gemini is around 105, the Ergo Omni is 155, the Lily Baby is 125. This is a really wallet friendly carrier. And what intrigued me was, how is it much cheaper? I mean, and for me, the material definitely is a bit more synthetic-y, clearly a cheaper fabric, whereas a lot of those other carriers I just mentioned use cottons that feel a bit more natural. And you know, in terms of their sort of design and so forth, they're probably a little bit more put together. This feels sort of a bit, there's a lot of bits and pieces to change and do, whereas those ones feel a bit smoother in the design. But in terms of the crucial things, in terms of comfort, I'm perfectly comfortable. It's got a good waistband. I'm able to get a good fit. I can get a good fit on several different body types. And it does, I mean, it doesn't last as long in terms of, as I said, I think you get to about a year in this one. Some of those others I just mentioned, you get to more like 2 years. So when it always becomes difficult with pricing, do I think it's a false economy? I think maybe it's not as an obvious saving as the other ones, because you last longer, they feel better. I think they last longer for your child, but I think they also will last through more children. So if you're planning to have more children, or you're planning to sell it on afterwards or gift it to somebody. I saw yesterday an Ergo that had that was 12 years old, gone through 4 children already, and is about to, the fifth that's going to use it is about to be born. It's been passed down, you know, through from aunts, uncles, etc., down through the family, and it's in amazing nick. And I can't see this one lasting as long. But that said, if you're only buying it for you for 1, maybe 2 babies, it's going to last fine. So it's about sort of working out where your price tag is. Maybe it's not quite is not going, doesn't feel quite as nice, but if those others are prohibitively expensive for you, this isn't a bad option at all. You know, you also can consider the others second hand, but again, you know, if you prefer to have something new from the start, this isn't a bad option and incredibly pocket friendly. So the other position I wanted to show you before I sign off is the forward facing, because forward facing is something that's extremely popular at the moment. Some people really like it, some people aren't bothered and don't need it, but some parents really, really like the option of doing it, and this is one of those carriers that does do forward facing. The downside, and however, of this carrier for forward facing is to set it up, you've got to take it off and completely restructure the carrier. And I say this is a downside because I always tell parents that when you are forward facing, the best option to do, if possible, is to, you know, keep it to short periods, respond to your baby's natural cues. You know, generally babies like to forward face for the most awake period, but need to be awake period of their sleep cycle, but need to be turned in long before they're sleepy, and generally sort of enjoy it most for sort of 30 minutes or so, but depends on the child. Some days it might just be 10 minutes, some days it might be more than 30 minutes, but it's a very active position. It's designed to be for sort of short bursts only, and then you turn them inwards long before they're tired to sort of avoid overstimulation, ensure they're comfortable, etc. And for more on this, you can see my blog post on forward facing. But so the idea is that I encourage parents to swap between forward facing and inward facing. So generally, carriers that give you the ability to swap easily are going to be much more favourable and worth paying for, because if you're going to actually use the forward facing, you are going to want to be able to ensure you can transfer between those easily. I've got to remember how to put this back together. And this carrier, unfortunately, isn't as obvious on how. Voila, remembered. It isn't as obvious how to do it. It's a little bit more of a palaver, as you've just seen, to go through all the steps to get it into this narrow position, because you're having to sort of completely open up the carrier, undo several buttons, and various other bits and bobs to get it into the forward-facing position. So you can imagine you can't really do this without somewhere to put your baby down. So if you're out and about, you're going to have to get someone to hold your baby for a bit while you move them. Whereas things like the ergo and the becco, they're easy to do with your baby still in the carrier, one-handed. And then this comes. I'm going to get the carrier secured first. Whereas this one is a little bit of a more of a palaver. And despite practicing this several times before starting this, I'm not 100% certain I have actually got this correct. So if I haven't, please do let me know. But the crucial bit of these is these come around here and clip in here. There we go. And so there we go. These clip in here, this attaches down there, and this buttons out. So please excuse my doll, she's a little bit small for forward facing. You normally would be doing this with a child who was 4 months or up, depending on being developmentally strong neck and being able to sort of sit in this position. So the nice thing is it gives a very seated carry. You get that nice sit. When I show parents in other carriers, I always show them to put their baby into a deep squat first and bring the carrier around them. This I find is less of a deep squat and more of a sort of very rigid sit position, but it's definitely one where their weight is on their bottom and not on their legs, which is a key for me. And otherwise largely comfortable. Arms can come out of the sides or over the top if the baby is older. So yeah, I find this design quite intriguing, but as I said, a little bit more clunky in terms of, because you've got the stuff coming round, there's a lot of steps to change baby back and forth. You can't do it with your arms free. So probably it's one of those things where this carrier is a lot cheaper, and if that fits in better with your budget, that's great. But this is one of the real sacrifices. If you are buying this carrier to have something that forward faces, you're going to find it much harder to swap between the two positions, and then that will mean you're either forward facing your child for longer and risking overstimulation, or you're not using it as much, in which case you possibly didn't need to buy a carrier that was forward facing in the first place anyway. So in that respect, if you're using forward facing a lot, it could well be worth paying that little bit extra for one where you are able to do it easily without taking the baby out and without as many steps to remember. In terms of positions, I've shown you the inward for the infant, and it's the same for a wider, but you just widen the seat for a bigger baby. I've shown you the outer position. The other position you can do is a back carry. This is really interesting because in the manual they suggest that you need 2 people to do it, that you need to put the carrier on, put the baby on the back. I can do it on my own. It's a little bit tricky, but you can do it on your own. Otherwise, this is the Infantino Go Forward. Any questions, please do get in contact and ask me.